In our home, ripe bananas end up turning into one of two things: banana bread or a smoothie. But as you can see here, smoothie's not a choice anymore. Unfortunately, the glass container was dropped and it shattered. I looked around for a replacement. It's about 50 bucks with shipping. So then I said, well, maybe I can just buy another Braun and be done with that. The cheapest one I found was very expensive, so I checked the Consumer Report ratings for blenders and ended up getting an Oster. Unlike my 500 watt Braun, this is rated at 800 watts, which should mean really good smoothies. Let's unpack and see what's inside the box. By opening the bottom, we're just able to lift the box to reveal the unit. There's the base, because it's all about the base. We know that, right? And what's supposedly unique about this versus the Braun is that the drive is all metal. And if you noticed earlier on the Braun, there was a plastic component. Although having it for many years, it was never an issue. It worked quite well. This one should have a glass jar. And a cardboard it doesn't want to release. There we go. Paperwork. It's 4 blades. And if I take this off, here's the mount that drops into here. Here's the blade itself. There's a rubber gasket between the blade and the jar. And hopefully we won't break this one. Though I will admit that Braun lasted many, many years. The unit is UL rated. It comes with a polarized plug. This is all plastic. Nothing fancy about these buttons. It does have a pulse mode, which I kind of like. The Braun had a mode in which the blades would actually spin backwards, which was great for after you had finished mixing something. You'd add a little bit of water and just spin the blades backwards, and it would clean off the blades and the inside of the jar. I'll have to read the instructions to see if that's a feature here, but just quickly looking at the buttons, I don't see that as an option unless it pulses in reverse, which I don't think it does. Oh, I almost forgot. There's the top lid, which has a semi-soft gasket, or stiff plastic, I guess I should say. And then there's the little jar in the center that can be used for measuring things. Also, just an opening so you can drop in ice cubes or other products when you're mixing. The glass jar is rounded, which helps with mixing because it creates a vortex. And there are these 4 ribs on the sides that help the material come back towards the center. And of course, there is a pouring spot on one end. Capacity for this is a total of 6 cups. On the underside of the unit, you have a fairly short cord. It's about 2 feet, maybe 1.5 feet. You do get 4 rubber padded feet, so the unit should be less prone to vibrating across the table when in operation. After thoroughly washing and drying all the parts, we're ready to assemble. Grab your jar, put it upside down, take the sealing ring and place it on the jar. Then we grab our blade, being careful not to grab by the sharp blade itself. And we put that in, again being careful not to gouge the sealing ring. And now we take our threaded jar nut and we thread that on. And you may have to go backwards before it catches because you don't want to cross thread. and make that snug. Turn the jar over. We take our lid. Now you'll notice the lid has a pointed end and sort of a handle on the back. This goes towards the spout on the glass jar. So that'll line up like this. And now we have our little feeder cap, and that has 2 tabs on it. And so this has 2 openings here. So we want it to just line up, and then you turn clockwise, and that locks it into place. Pop quiz. What's wrong with this picture? Answer: both these units are plugged in, and there are no jars on top of them. And that's a no. Why? Because they should never be plugged in until you're actually ready to use them as blenders. Case in point, the Braun unit has a safety apparatus built into it that prevents the unit from operating until there's a jar in it. So while it's plugged in, I can turn the knob, and nothing happens. The Oster unit does not have that function. So if I press pulse, the unit operates even though there's no jar in here. So imagine if you have just the threaded nut with the blade on it, and it's plugged in, and you happen to lean over this and hit the pulse button or any of these buttons, the unit would operate, and that could be disastrous. So you never know which unit may or may not have a safety device. It's definitely not with this Oster unit. So just make sure they're not plugged in, and you won't have a situation. Before we can blend, we have to put the jar on top of the motor unit. And something to note, with this unit, you'll notice that there are some grooves. They look like ramps. There are 4 of them on each corner of the unit. And if you look at the base on the glass, you'll see that there is a glass nub here and a glass nub here. And those need to ride down this ramp until it hits a stop, so that when the unit is operating, the jar is forced into the stop and it keeps the jar from turning. It's a different system than some other blenders that you might run into, but it's what they use here. So the awkward thing is, because the spindle doesn't always stop in the same place, your alignment as to where the handle will end up could be different each time you go to mount it. So you bring it down, and we just turn, and then it finally catches, and you're at a stop. It won't go any further. So now you know you're in that position. Now let me lift, turn the spindle a little, and see if it lines up again in that area. Turn the spindle a little bit more. Let's see what happens. No, so this time it doesn't. We have to go around. So the stops will catch either on the front back corner or on the opposite corners, depending on where that spindle has stopped. But just make sure that it comes and fully seats and doesn't go any further. Once that's done, then you're ready to put items into your blender. To try out this unit, I'm going to make a smoothie that contains 1/3 of a cup of oatmeal, 1 to 2 bananas, about 1.5 cups of frozen strawberries, they could be fresh, and maybe half a can of chunky pineapple, and about 1/3 of a cup of yogurt. This happens to be just homemade yogurt, so plain yogurt is fine, or you can substitute a milk or a cream if you like. We first add 1/3 cup of oats, put the lid back on. We're now okay to plug in the blender. I hold the top of the unit and I hit the pulse button so that we can pulverize the oats. When you're done, you should have a flour-like consistency to the oats. Our next ingredient is the banana, and that's good if you drop it in chunks instead of just dropping in the whole banana regardless of how ripe it is. We go to our next soft ingredient, which is the pineapple, and it has some juice, which will be our liquid, and maybe about half a can. And then we're going to add some yogurt, and finally we're going to add the frozen strawberries. Since these are the hardest element, they're going to go on top. That gives everything else a chance to start mixing before these are drawn into the blades, because this will slow down the motor. I threw in a few extra pineapples. We place the lid, making sure the pointy part is with the spout. And then we're going to hold this as we engage our speed. And we're ready to pour. Making sure to unplug our unit. We grab the pitcher, and it looks smooth. And delicious. While the smoothie tastes good, I will say that I'm not so impressed with the Oster's ability to pulverize the oats. There's still a little bit of grittiness into the smoothie, and of course it's a smoothie, so it should be smooth. But maybe a little bit longer. I ran that for about a minute, which is what I used to do with the old blender, and not knowing which speed to really try out. I mean, of course there's liquefy on this end. I just started at the lower end, just worked my way up. The motor wasn't running strong enough. But once I got into the higher ranges, it had no problem with the frozen strawberries, which was an issue for the lower powered Braun unit. At 800 watts, this didn't seem to have any struggle with the iced strawberries. So it does seem to have the power. Maybe it just needs a little bit more time to finish its pulverizing. I ran the remaining batch of the smoothie in the liquefy mode for about 30 seconds, and that indeed made it super smoothie. Like every blender I've ever owned, the spout always seems to hold on to a drop or two. We've finished with our smoothie, and this is what the inside of the glass jar looks like. I'm going to add some water and see if this cleans up. Looking inside the jar, it looks like the blades have been cleaned off, but that's about it. But maybe that's just enough. Having finished my first smoothie with this blender, there are some pros and cons. Let's start with the power cord. For some people, this may be too short. I think it's just right for the countertop. It's not too long, and it's definitely easily hidden behind the appliance when you're done using it. The base of this unit has a drain channel, so should you have overflow, or maybe you didn't seal the gasket correctly and it leaks out, then it's going to go out the back of the unit and not in front of the controls. The stem here is all metal, so that's being driven right from the motor, as opposed to plastic on some other units. Mounting the glass jar to the base is a little awkward because it's just different from other units, but it actually works. You just need to find that quarter turn for the glass jar to lock into, but once it's locked in, it's not going anywhere. I'm not a big fan of the look. It sort of reminds me of Bender from Futurama. It has 8 buttons. They could have just put a simple rotary knob to handle all those functions, but it does have 800 watts of power, so it will go through almost any material you throw at it. I don't like the fact that this motor will work at any time that it's plugged in. There's no safety lockout in the base to detect the jar. So if you have kids, this may not be the unit for you. I thought that this wasn't my favorite lid because with my old unit, I had all these seals. So if I was running the jar full of liquid, it wouldn't leak out. But this was a pain to clean, whereas this was actually really easy to clean out. So I'm now a fan of this. The blade was sharp, did a wonderful job. This cap here is actually a little larger, so it could actually hold some more liquid. Plus, it also just gives you a bigger opening to drop material in there, ice cubes, some produce, whatever you need to get into your jar. The seal worked perfect. The base is a little smaller than I'm used to, but again, overall, the unit did its job very well. And for price performance, I think it's a great buy because units that are comparable to this are in the $200 price range, and this is way under that. So I can recommend this unit. If you found this video interesting or useful, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, join the subscription team, and as always, thank you ever so much for watching.